It's Monday, the 29th of March 2021. Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Headlines, the business news you need in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. In today's headlines, a record weekend for the housing market across the country triggers warnings that borrowers are getting in too deep. Plus, the Morrison government is thrown further into turmoil after a backbencher is forced to quit over taking lewd photos. JobKeeper ends, but what does it mean for the economy? And guess how many beer varieties Dan Murphy stocks? Our lead story today, it was the biggest weekend of the year for the property market so far, with 3,800 houses going under the hammer across the country and 84% were sold. More houses, higher clearance rates, this is a very hot market. It was the highest number of sales in 3 years, with anecdotal evidence suggesting reserve prices were regularly smashed. Sydney's preliminary clearance rate was 89%, according to CoreLogic. Canberra was 86% and Melbourne was 84%. Adelaide's clearance rate was 74%, while Perth and Brisbane were both under 70%. Mortgage market watchers are predicting house prices will keep rising this year by anything up to 20%. But there are a few voices starting to raise concerns about people's ability to repay loans. Mark Burris, head of Yellow Brick Road, said buyers needed to use comparison rates when making decisions on loans. His point is that loans that include cashback offers and honeymoon rates often revert to higher interest rates, so understanding the full cost of the loan is critical. So far, the Reserve Bank has been relaxed about the market, but as the weekend auctions show, the markets in Sydney and Melbourne are now hot, and that will make regulators think hard. There has to be a natural end to the house price rises, but markets tend to overshoot that level initially and then fall back. It's something home buyers should keep in mind. In overseas news, Wall Street surged over the weekend with all the major indices up more than 1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P 500 both hit new records. New COVID-19 cases in Europe have started to pick up again, particularly in Italy, Germany and France. A number of emerging economies, including Brazil, India, Turkey, Pakistan and Bangladesh, are back to near previous highs. And the vessel blocking the Suez Canal moved slightly over the weekend, but not enough to dislodge. The 400-metre container ship has been wedged in for more than 5 days, and heavier tugboats are now being rushed to the area to help shift the boat. Locally, any hopes the Prime Minister had that the crisis engulfing his government around its handling of disrespectful behaviour towards women were scuttled over the weekend after it emerged that a Queensland Liberal allegedly took a lewd photo of a woman without her permission. Backbencher Andrew Laming will now quit Parliament at the next election, but the PM is under pressure to fire him early, triggering a by-election and the prospect of a minority government for Mr Morrison. Mr Laming said he'd take sick leave from today, the third Liberal MP on sick leave, to undertake empathy counselling. The outbreak of 3 community-transmitted COVID-19 cases hasn't yet led to a lockdown in Brisbane, and only Tasmania has announced a hard border closure with the Sunshine State. Let's hope there's no closures, because Fear and Greed is broadcasting out of the Gold Coast this week. Meanwhile, the number of vaccinations across the country pushed past 500,000 over the weekend. Last week, the ASX ended up 1.7% for the week, the best since early February. Healthcare stocks were the best performers, while tech stocks were the biggest underperformers. The single biggest rise was Crown Resorts, up nearly 20% on the back of the takeover offer from PE group Blackstone. JobKeeper ended over the weekend, triggering fears of a big jump in the unemployment rate. Federal Treasury Secretary Stephen Kennedy last week said up to 150,000 people could lose their job, and 1.1 million people will stop receiving the payment. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said the payment was always a temporary measure. The amount of the job seeker payments also falls from today. Media group Nine Entertainment said it experienced ransomware attacks over the weekend and told staff not to turn on their computers. The group had to shift broadcasting away from their Sydney studios to Melbourne, and some programs had to be dropped. Ransomware is a growing form of cyber attack where a ransom is demanded to unlock a company's systems. TPG chair David Teo has surprisingly left the company, sending its share price down almost 7%. Mr Teo has spent more than 30 years building the group and as a result built himself a billion-dollar fortune. His decision to step down was a surprise and follows TPG's merger last year with Vodafone Hutchison in a $15 billion deal. Mr Teo said it was the right time to step down. He still owns 17% of the business. And finally, liquor retailer Dan Murphy's is part of the Woolworths stable, but will leave the mothership in June when the liquor businesses of the supermarket giant lists on their own. On Friday, Dan Murphy's unveiled new stores, which includes in-store education and more craft beers. In fact, they'll sell more than 450 different types of beer. That's the Fear and Greed business headlines for today. Make sure you subscribe or follow so you get it every morning. If you'd like more detail and more stories, search for the full Fear and Greed podcast. Today, it also includes an interview with Matthew Kidman, principal at Centennial Asset Management, about investing in smaller companies. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day.